Please welcome Dr. Dennis Creighton.
Good morning. It gives me great pleasure to be here today to celebrate two institutions that I've had an involvement with in the past 11 years, 12 years. With Philadelphia's dancing classrooms, my office was the first in the district to offer a contract with them to get them started in the Philadelphia Public Schools. And I remember meeting Jane and Joyce and realizing this is something we should have thought of years ago. When you see young people dancing and developing those social skills, just not stepping on the other person's foot goes a long way in life. But also it teaches our young people grace, how to be a person with a sense of style, as well as a person who can forgive when someone steps on your foot. Within the partnership we've had with Musicopia, it was at the beginning of my leadership in the central office. And I can tell you that prior to my being there, there was a difficulty with outside organizations working with the central office. There was a sense of fear that there would be that tenacity or that possibility of replacing our music and art teachers. The first thing I told our instrumental music teachers was that there was no way that we could have any type of an adverse relationship with the cultural community. No one wanted their jobs, but we needed everyone to support their jobs. Because many people in our society still think of the arts as a frill. It's icing on the cake. It's not necessary. You know, you can afford it when you have those good years, but it's not really critical. And I'm here to tell you that that is not only misguided, the research shows that it is totally untrue. Personally, at the age of 10, I became deathly anorexic, had to be hospitalized. Why? I couldn't read. I couldn't do a primer. Dyslexia wasn't known at that time. All people knew was that I was slow. I remember at one point hearing my mother informed that maybe I was mildly retarded. And I had a fight with God saying, if I have another 8 years of embarrassment, that's it. I'm not going to live. So I just stopped eating. Medicine in the 1960s wasn't that far removed from the Spanish Inquisition in some ways. Sorry, Susan. But in reality, I mean, I still remember doctors wearing the mirrors on their foreheads. They tested me for every form of cancer that they could think that was killing me. And some of the experiments didn't go too well. I remember one where my mother was holding my head, 2 orderlies were holding me down. A doctor was trying to inject me with a radioactive dye so they could check my circulatory system. And after the left arm was bleeding, he decided to try this huge needle. The needle enough was to make me almost pass out, on the other arm. And after the other arm was bleeding, I overheard him say, "Oh, I see what the problem is. There's no point on this needle." At which time, my mother became the tiger mother and almost ripped off his head. That was one of the last times. But while I was in St. Christopher's Hospital, they put me in arts therapy because they didn't know what to do with me. And while I was working on this slab of wood, which I had turned into an island, and painting it and building, a whole basic environment, I overheard one of the therapists calling his colleagues over and saying, "Look at this kid, he's gifted." That changed my life. That told me there was something to live for. In the public schools that I was transferred into, soon they discovered that I could sing. I don't know if back in the day we used to start the movies on a Saturday afternoon with the Star Spangled Banner, and I would always sing out because I enjoyed it. I didn't know that I had a gift. Suddenly, I was the boy soprano soloist for my school, had the lead. I remember my parents coming to my graduation where I sang Climb Every Mountain, because that was my theme, that I would never allow myself to be put into a situation where I would give up hope again. My parents didn't know that I sang. And being afraid of an audience, I closed my eyes. And when I finished, I opened my eyes, and there was my mother weeping into the shoulder of my father. It was my first standing ovation. Today, I have a doctorate in literacy from the University of Pennsylvania. I founded the Sounds of Learning program at the Opera Company, for which over 200,000 children have experienced over the past 22 years. I believe, and I know, that the arts are not only transformative, they save lives. And some people are debating, we can't afford arts if we need science. Walter Alvarez, many years ago, a known physiologist, recognized his son was highly gifted in science. He could have gone to a school like Central High School. Walter decided, no, I want my kid to go to a career and technical education school and, give him those hands-on experiences. His son, Lewis, went to the technical education school, learned drafting, woodworking, never had calculus. In 1968, he won the Nobel Prize for Physics. If we think of Einstein, Einstein made it clear. His understanding of the theory of relativity came to him from inspiration, intuition, and he identified intuition in his mind as music. Again, Einstein wasn't the best student, wasn't too good in math, but he had the capacity to dream, to use that creative insight to change the world. The one thing that the arts give our students is the ability to think differently, to extrapolate out of a situation and ponder a new pathway, not to give up, to think creatively, to be curious, to think of things that others haven't thought of. We know that we are in a modern era with transportation that can take you. I couldn't believe the president was in Afghanistan one day, and the next day I saw him in Washington. All of that began with an art student studying under Benjamin West in London. He saw a power loom, and he immediately thought of another application. His name was Fulton. He invented the steamship. And we know that we live in a world today where the internet connects all of us into a global village. That began with an artist who was also famous at his time but struggling. He invented the telegraph and gave up painting because he couldn't make a life at it. Max Planck was a pianist, a Nobel Prize physicist. The arts teach us to think differently. They enable us to ponder things that we haven't thought. They give us hope. And as Dr. Duckworth at Penn has pointed out, the most critical thing our students need is the resiliency to overcome the adversity they're confronted with in today's world. In some neighborhoods, the level of post-traumatic stress is over 70% for the people that live there. Children come to school every day. They come to school, but it doesn't necessarily mean they're totally prepared for learning. We know that when children have an overabundance of cortisol in their bloodstream, it damages the ability to develop new memory. It damages the hippocampus. The hippocampus uses oxygen and glucose to be able to basically create new memory. Without oxygen and glucose, which is what we need in our muscles when we're scared for fight response, we're not at the place where we need to be to learn. We know 23 minutes of music in research removes cortisol from the bloodstream. Any type of music removes cortisol. So when you're driving on 95 and you're stuck in traffic, don't turn on KYW. Turn on your favorite music and just relax, because KYW may not get you there any faster. The most important thing is to realize that our children are biochemical entities, and we can manipulate brain chemistry and optimize learning potential. And while we know that the arts give us the ability to think differently and to problem solve in unique ways and to invent things that haven't been thought of, they also heal us. And that is the most important thing that we have to remember. As a species, as living entities, did we create the arts, or did the arts create us? They are our corporate signature. We know the arts are there in our archaeological digs because of the shards of pottery and the design. Look at this beautiful room. It is a design masterpiece. It didn't just happen. Everything that we understand about culture comes from someone in the arts. And we know from biology that if you think of a petri dish, it is a culture. Organisms grow in a culture. And the arts are the culture that will save our children and give our nation hope.